Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Still Peaking. Today I have my good friend Kunal here with me, who originally wanted to be a physics professor, but then found his way into Silicon Valley in his 30s after trying a string of different career options. Thank you for joining me, Kunal.
I'm very excited to be here. Glad to share my experience.
Amazing. I feel like you had a very different upbringing from me, who grew up under a very strict tiger mom, but so curious to hear about how you grew up in Jersey.
Absolutely. So I was the youngest of three. I was a baby boy of the family. I had two older sisters, and it was very different than having a tiger mom or helicopter parents experience. My parents are actually pretty hands off. And so the one thing that they guided me with was just, oh, do well in school. So they would look at report cards and things. But then when it came to career choices, deciding what I wanted to do with my life, they were very hands off. I didn't have what you hear typically in Asian families or even South Asian families is, oh, become a doctor or become a lawyer or become an engineer.
Were they the same way with your sisters?
They were. Looking back on it now is a bit of a double edged sword because when you're that young, you have limited perspective. You don't really know if you're making a good life path choice for yourself, what you're studying and whatnot, because you have just the academic view of things. You haven't done the job or worked in the industry or anything like that. But on the other hand, one of the great positives I think about it was that it really helped me exercise that muscle of, okay, how do I make a decision when there's a lot of uncertainty? Or I don't have all the information, or it may not be the correct answer. How do I deal with that then too?
So, if your parents weren't super strict, then were you always just a pretty good kid, very intrinsically motivated?
Definitely, I was much more self motivated because I was very curious. I was very into reading books, Curious George, and things like that. And I found myself naturally gravitating towards math and science.
Every parent's dream.
Exactly, right? And then in terms of strictness, my parents were definitely strict on discipline in terms of not getting into any trouble and staying away from like crime and things like that, not doing graffiti or getting in any academic or school trouble, no detentions, things like that. I think part of it was my parents don't come from high achieving backgrounds as what typically is considered high achieving. And so even for them, it was a bit of, hey, we don't really know this academic system. We grew up in a different country. We haven't pursued these kinds of fields. So we ourselves don't really know. And so it was a lot of just relying on friends and hearing their thoughts on what they were doing and trying to distill that into, okay, what makes sense for me. But in terms of discipline and things like that, my parents definitely did try to have a curfew and all those kinds of
Right.
things.
So, did you grow up naturally being high achieving, or was there someone else pushing you to get good grades?
That's actually a very funny question. So turns out when I was young, I was actually a pretty bad student. I would get in trouble for talking back to the teacher, not listening, talking over the teacher to talk with my friends, poor conduct. And I remember in elementary school, I think it was either third or fourth grade, after parent teacher conference, my dad came home and my parents were upset. And he sat me down and he said something that stuck with me. He told me, this is your life to make something of. When you misbehave in school and stuff, it doesn't harm me, it doesn't harm your mom or your sisters. Ultimately, this is going to come back to you. And so, what life do you want to live? Do you have dreams? Do you have things you want to achieve? Just know, hey, if you want to do those things, this is the platform that you have to make that happen. And I think what that ended up doing, which was actually really profound for me, was it challenged me. My dad basically said, oh, I don't think you can do better than this. And I was, oh, in my head, I was thinking, oh, I wasn't even trying. I'll show you.
Those are big words for a little kid.
And I think it was very impressive on his part to communicate it in a way that actually got through to me. So I don't remember his exact words, but it was essentially that where it was, hey, this is your life. This is your opportunity for the taking. What do you want to do with it? And I challenge you to do better. And that really was amazing because I had this interesting balance where my mother was very supportive and my father was more challenging. Try to impress me. What can you do better? Why aren't you doing better? Things like that. Always pushing me to achieve higher. Whereas when I would fall down, my mother would be there to support me to get back up.
Oh, so carrot and the stick. Okay, that's awesome.
So worked out that way magically somehow.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it was planned on their part.
And then from there, did you just internalize that and say, okay, I'm going to do well in school and I'm going to prove him wrong and all these things?
So it started off that way, and okay, well, let me see how good I can do if I actually try. And then I, for lack of a better word, got addicted to that success. I was like, oh wow, this is pretty impressive. How far can I go? And I just got into it myself, and then became intrinsic. It was more self motivation, being drawn to just the concept of always trying to do the best I can.
Because I also feel success almost becomes a habit where once you hit that peak of being a good student in school, you're used to almost having that brand of being the smart kid or doing well. And I remember if I didn't rank well in our quarterly rankings at school, people would go, "Ooh, Maggie didn't do well this quarter." And so initially, it's parents drive you to get good grades, and then eventually, okay, I have to just maintain my brand and keep doing this.
It's true. You do build a reputation and then it becomes self-fulfilling. It can be
It can be bad.
it can be bad.
Because then you're afraid to fail, and then you don't take risks.
Exactly. You become much more risk averse. You feel almost boxed in to this paradigm that has enveloped your life at that point. And maybe you're that person in that moment, but as you get older, you want to grow, you want to expand your wings, you want to try different things. I think going to college was that opportunity for me. I definitely felt boxed in high school into this, oh, he's a math, science, smart kid. But I had other interests. I had to dance, I had to play guitar. I had all these creative other things that didn't really fit with the archetype that I had fallen into in high school. And so college was a chance to explore that. And I think it's important. You said it can be bad if you're always trying to fit the archetype that you think you're supposed to be as opposed to doing what you actually want to do.
Tell me about college.
College was a very interesting period for me. I think I really embraced the opportunity to try a bunch of different things. And that wasn't even just from an academic standpoint, but dancing and playing guitar, going to my first parties, things like that, just being much more social, making friends, and exploring what's out there. I think what it did do from a career standpoint is it really solidified my interest in math, science, and especially physics. And so I've leaned into that pretty hard. I had the opportunity to do several different internships, and I just kept following that path and not doing as much self reflection as I probably should have.
But you were maybe just pursuing things that were interesting to you.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's important. If I were to recommend something to college students, it would definitely be take that time, take that opportunity to try anything and everything under the sun. This is you're there and they have access to all these different things, all these different courses. Really explore your interests. It's the time to do that.
And when you entered college, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do in the future?
I had a generally strong idea that I wanted to study some science, engineering, or mostly aerospace engineering. I was very fascinated with NASA. I wanted to work there at the time. And then I stumbled into physics by just taking courses on the fringe of engineering and then realizing, wait, I actually this stuff even more than my engineering classes. And then I leaned into that further to see, okay, well, how much do I get?
I think one thing I didn't do in college was explore as much as possible because I was so just set on going to med school. And I think it's incredible because when you start exploring things, right? Physics came up because you were taking engineering classes, not because you knew it existed necessarily. And I think the more you explore, the more things adjacent to what you're doing you learn about, and then your entire worldview just expands because you're exploring and open to it.
Exactly. And that is the importance of not getting too much tunnel vision on one direction and really letting your mind explore or expand beyond that and build out your perspective.
And then when you graduated, what did you do?
So at graduation, I remember my senior year, I was trying to figure out, okay, I've done this physics major. What am I going to do with it? Where do I want to go? And I was still wanting to pursue academia or some type of government lab where I would do cutting edge research. It sounded very fascinating to me. But it dawned on me that I had no idea what field I wanted to study or what research I wanted to do. So I thought, okay, well, let me go work in industry and maybe that'll give me an idea of what's hot in industry right now, what are the important problems that we're trying to solve in physics, and hopefully guide me towards, okay, what will I study in grad school? So my plan coming out of college was work a year, figure out a field, and then go back to grad school.
Mm-hmm. And you were pretty sure of that?
I thought I had it all figured out.
Okay. Was the consideration of what your other friends were doing something that you thought about when deciding what you wanted to do after college?
It was. You definitely, me and everyone else would look at our peers to figure out what everyone was doing. And especially in physics, in the physics major, it was a given that you either went to grad school to pursue PhD in physics, or you completely left the field and went into something totally different that was just very quantitative or analytical. So I had friends that went to quantitative finance on Wall Street, or some went to consulting. And then I'd say a 50%, maybe 70% went on to graduate school, studying at really great physics programs at various universities.
And instead, you chose to maybe spend a year working.
Yeah, something that was different for me than many of my peers that went on to grad school is that they had actually done some formal research during their undergraduate years. I'd done a bit in my internships, but not so much where I was 100% confident that was the path I wanted to take. And I could have just fallen into, oh, everyone else is doing it, I can do it too.
Right.
But the uncertainty behind it wanted me to have a bit more certainty. And so that drove me, oh, let me just see what's out there first.
And then what was the conclusion?
So the conclusion was I spoke with so many of my coworkers who had come from various places. Some were former academic professors, some were PhD graduates, some were folks who dropped out of their PhD programs because they realized it wasn't for them, postdocs as well. So after talking with all these different people, I started to formulate a better understanding of what it meant to do a PhD, and especially in physics, what that path looks. For example, I had no idea that it was typical to do 2 postdocs after finishing your PhD. And that was considered standard before you could get an opportunity to be a professor at a university. I also didn't realize how challenging the path actually was. You really needed to, whatever opportunity you got, you might have to move halfway across the country or move to a whole different country to pursue your postdoc or whatever opportunity there was. And there's no guarantees either. Getting tenure is a very challenging process. So all of these things were new to me. And had I applied to grad school as a senior, all of this was still things I didn't know.
And then learning all those things made that path much less desirable for you.
Right. I think in a perfect world, that was the ideal path for me to take in terms of, I think I'm very drawn to being a physics professor or some teacher. I love the subject matter, and people have said to me that they feel they understand it much better when I explain it to them. So I think I have this natural intuition or path to that role, but there are other aspects of it that turn me off. There's a lot of sacrifice that goes in. Not only would it be sacrifice for me to travel wherever I needed to, move across the country or whatnot, but if I had a significant other, if I had kids, because this is a very long path, usually you don't reach your professorship until your late 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
Am I going to bring these people along this journey with me against their will, or if it's not the best thing for them? So a lot of that weighed on me. And of course, at the end of the pathway, if I do become a professor, is it going to be fulfilling in the sense of, is it going to give me the compensation I want? Is it going to give me access to doing the other things in life that I want to do? So a lot of that definitely came up that I hadn't thought about before.
And then once you realized that maybe this wasn't the path that you wanted to take, did you have a career crisis, or were you more, okay, I'll just figure it out?
I absolutely had a career crisis. That's when I first learned about quarter life crisis. I started reading about it on the internet and all this stuff. And I was, yep, that is definitely me. And it's a big shock to the system. I remember feeling so lost, and I didn't even know who to turn to either, because it seems many of your friends, they have it all together. They've got their path, especially a lot of my close friends, the ones that went into consulting or Wall Street, they were just doing it. I do 2 years here, and then I go here, and then I do that. And it seemed all planned out, laid out. And here I was suddenly I didn't know what my next step was going to be. And you feel very lost and almost lonely if you don't have someone to share that experience with.
And then what did you do?
So at that point, I started to look to my friends and other people to see, okay, if I'm unhappy or I'm unsure about this path, should I be exploring other paths? What should I do? Um, and so at that time, a bunch of my friends were in consulting. And in this defense industry physics job, I was really unhappy. I didn't know anyone in the area, so I didn't have friends around. Even my coworkers, I didn't really connect with them. There weren't very many younger coworkers in my age bracket. So it was a very challenging time. And then to not enjoy my job either and be unsure about the next steps that I was going to take from it, I felt very confused about what to do.
Right. So you had no friends, no
Right.
job that you liked, and no idea what you wanted to do after
Yeah.
that.
So at that point, it was just I had to try something because staying stagnant wasn't a choice. I knew this wasn't the right spot, so I had to try something else.
Mhm.
So I looked at my friends for inspiration. I saw they were in consulting, and I applied to consulting jobs and ended up going to into a consulting role.
So it's, oh, I'll just see what they're doing and try that. They seem happy.
Right, exactly. Which not always the best thought process, but I think the important part from that was just trying something, get more information about what it is I do want to do.
Mhm. And what did you think of consulting?
It wasn't the right fit for me. It had its pros and cons. I think it definitely had an analytical aspect of it that I enjoyed, but there were other aspects that were I personally weren't well suited for. I wasn't as good with a lot of the politics that are involved, or even back then, the being more sociable, the public speaking aspects of it. And what it did do that was great though is it exposed me to software engineering. And that's something that I hadn't had as much exposure to in my physics programs and things like that. Some of the things that were not aligned with what I wanted in life was lots of travel involved in consulting, especially if you want to do the strategy consulting or even high profile IT consulting projects. And so that was one thing. And then also, I missed being more technical. I did miss that aspect of engineering and things like that.
Right. So then at this point, did you have a good idea? Were you starting to have an idea of what you wanted in a job, or were you still more exploring, seeing what was out there?
It was still a bit confusing, but I felt I'd gotten a bit more information. I realized, hey, okay, I thought that physics was exactly what I wanted to do, but turns out, hey, I like this computer science thing too. So it's not necessarily, oh, I have to do the one thing that I felt I was born to do. It's more, oh, I also these adjacent things. Maybe I try to explore that. And so as I started looking into software engineering, this was around the time that Google and Facebook and all these big tech companies were really becoming household names and transforming the tech industry. it it became interesting to me, like, oh, this could be a viable path. I started reading more about what do these roles typically do, what projects do they work on, and it piqued my interest. And so I thought, hey, why don't I dip my toes in and see if this could be a potential path for me.
I think there are so many different ways to transition into software engineering.
Mhm.
What was the way that you did it?
So the approach I took, so I felt I didn't have enough software engineering experience to really break into one of these Google or top tech companies. And so what I wanted to do was find a risk averse way that I could learn more about software engineering, really solidify and make sure, hey, is this a path I want to take or something I want to learn? And then go into it more deeply. So what I ended up doing is I actually ended up going back to defense because they had this program that would let me take classes part time and they would cover the cost. So I figured, hey, rather than jumping directly into a $100,000 or $200,000 master's program, why don't I first try it out over here, see if I really get it. If I don't, I'll figure something else out at that point. But this is a good way for me to not tie myself down to something before I've really figured out that it's what I want to do for the next few years. At that time, also, one of my good friends moved to the DC area. So I knew it wouldn't be as lonely. I'd have someone to hang out with and go through, hey, what's working in the defense industry, what's life like, and sharing that experience while I was doing this part-time master's as well. So things sort of fell into place in that I could try it in a better environment.
And I feel like you and I have both had some experience working in the defense government space. Obviously, you much more. But I guess, could you share some of your gripes with working in a federal entity type of organization?
I think the industry has its pros and cons, any industry. Some of the big pros, I think, are that it's stable, it's got good hours, 9 to 5. It's not a very stressful environment. Maybe certain jobs are, but the one I was in wasn't. But the cons I felt were it's very risk averse. So you're not going to be working with the latest and greatest technologies. They're very hesitant to change things. This mentality of if it ain't broke, don't try to go and fix it. And so your exposure to the cutting edge technology and skills that you want to build will be very limited. And that was frustrating for me because I really wanted to get to that forefront of technology.
Yeah.
The other thing is it's also very relationship driven, and so a lot of these contracts and things are won and solidified over business relationships between the various defense industry organizations or companies and the government.
Mhm. I think, especially as a young person with a lot of energy and passion to just throw yourself into doing something,
Yeah.
a government or big organization role is really challenging because things move slowly and you don't feel you're working on the latest and greatest. So
Yep.
you're just doing a job.
Absolutely, you can feel just a cog in a machine. Yep.
So then you got your master's, and then did you find an engineering job after that?
So something that I hadn't foreseen at the time was that I wouldn't have access to any career resources after I finished this part-time master's program. So I had the degree, but now how do I actually get the job? And so applying through recruiting websites and stuff like that had limited success. I got some interviews, but then I also realized that there were some big gaps in my knowledge. Even though I had the degree, I hadn't done any heavy software engineering in my job. I'd done some, but it wasn't to the scale of the things that you'd see in Silicon Valley.
Mhm.
So feeling like, okay, I've done this degree, I'm not breaking in, it didn't pan out exactly how I thought it would. What am I going to do now?
Right. Did you feel like you wasted your time then? If you couldn't land a job after, do you feel like, wow, I just spent the past 3 years working at this job that I really didn't, getting this degree that now doesn't seem to be doing anything for me?
No, I definitely went through that. I was very frustrated. I had sucked it up, done this job because I knew it was helping to pay for the degree, and I was just once I get through this, everything will get better.
Right.
And when it didn't work out that way immediately, I was very frustrated and very, oh man, am I back to square one again? Was this not the right choice?
Mhm.
So lots of feelings of I made a mistake or something like that.
And so you went to go get an MBA after that, right? What made you decide to get an MBA versus, oh, maybe I'll just keep applying?
Right. So that was definitely a tough choice to make. I think when I found that I wasn't getting the type of interviews at the places I wanted and I wasn't doing as well in the interviews as I wanted, that pushed me, okay, what else can I do with what I've done so far?
Mhm.
And are any of those other options appealing to me? And so during this period, I actually went into a really deep dive of just exploring all the potential paths that I could take. And I think this is a challenge that some people, high achieving people especially, will face is that in some sense, you have access to do so many different things because you're very successful or hardworking, whatever. You could go to med school.
You could do
You could do
anything.
anything almost,
Yeah.
right? If you're, especially if you're creatively talented, you might want to pursue a creative. Do I want to start a band? Do I want to be a singer? Do I want to be a dancer? All these kinds of things. So it's very challenging to figure out, okay, well, what am I going to do? And so during this time period, I really tried to narrow down to, okay, what are the things that I'm even remotely interested in at all, or even a little bit. And everything that is a hard no for me, just take it off the plate immediately. Just stop even considering them or looking at them. And then with the things I had left, and it was, oh, maybe at med school, there are more analytical specialties in medicine that I could be a good fit for. So I considered that. A bunch of my analytical engineering friends, again, they were doing their MBAs and they were going to product management. I was, oh, maybe that might be a good fit for me. And so when I went through all of this, I was able to rule out med school for myself because I realized it's a very long path. And if you're not in it for the right reasons, you're really interested in being a doctor, what it actually means to be a doctor, see patients and do that, then it wouldn't be the right fit for me. There's many great aspects of it, but there's also a very long road to do it. And so you have to be properly committed for the right reasons. So I ruled that out. And then I was very interested in product management because I thought, hey, this might be a good combination of my technical skills with my desire to do something a bit more people facing or surrounded by people that I felt I fit in with more, things like that. And then I was even considering strategy consulting because I had tried IT consulting, but strategy consulting I hadn't really dipped my toes into.
Maybe I'll if I try something slightly different.
Maybe slightly different. I might. And so that narrowed me down to, okay, well, product management and perhaps strategy consulting were the two potential options of what I could do from here. And so to get into those paths, I realized, okay, well, I want some career support to make this transition because I know what it's to not have it. And that wasn't working.
Yeah.
So an MBA program was exactly that type of career transition support that I needed.
I think in Silicon Valley, there's a lot of people poo-pooing getting an MBA, or they think it's a waste of time, it's a waste of money. Oh, you have a CS degree. You could have just pivoted into strategy consulting or into product management.
Right.
Why would you get an MBA? But I think from your perspective, when you say, if you want that career support, you probably could have moved into one of those roles if you really gave it a lot of effort. But also, I think having support is really nice.
You make a really good point. Did I have the skills to do the job? I think I developed the skills, but then you also need access to get into those roles. And there's the hard way and there's the easier way. And these MBA programs are very well geared towards filling these positions. A lot of these companies recruit from MBA programs specifically for these roles. So it's sort of, okay, well, if I want to maximize my chances of landing this job, then it means I really should go down this path instead of trying to do this one.
Right. I feel also an MBA is a pretty big commitment, both time-wise and also financially.
Yes.
So how much conviction did you have in wanting to make these career changes that you chose to do an MBA?
So I definitely continued being a bit more conservative, risk averse. I thought, okay, well, look, I might be interested in this. Let me apply and let me see where I get in. Will I get into a program that will be compelling enough for me to take on the debt, take on the 2 years of time, the opportunity cost? So I didn't want to make that decision until I knew what my options actually were. And I could have wasted a lot of time preparing for the GMAT and going through the whole application process and all that. But that was ultimately, I think that's worth it to make a better decision. And so I had a backup plan in the sense of, hey, okay, if I don't get into a program I really want to go to, then what am I going to try instead? But my primary path forward was, okay, let me apply to schools, see where I get in, and then do the cost benefit analysis to see if it's worth going.
Right. And was MBA worth going?
Yes and no. It's like there's pros and cons to it. I think ultimately yes, because it put me on the path that I'm on now, and I'm very happy where I am now. I met amazing people that I would never have met otherwise. I learned a lot of things that I would have never learned otherwise because I wasn't very exposed to economics and the finance side of things. It gave me a lot more perspective, and I think that's really important in general. Is the more perspective you can get in life, I feel like the more information you have to make good decisions.
Right.
So I definitely enjoyed the experience too. A lot of traveling, a lot of fun stuff, exposure to different cultures, met people from all over the world. But then there were aspects of it that I realized, okay, this is different than I expected. And so the emphasis in business school, I think, in my opinion, the most important thing is really meet people, make connections, build relationships, because these are going to be people working in these different industries that you may want to transition to at one point, or you may work with them at some point. So that part of it was great. And it gave me an opportunity to try out, okay, I'm considering product management, I'm considering consulting. Can I try these things out? And will I have access to recruiting to get into them?
Right. Because I think a big part, something that you mentioned earlier, was after you got your master's degree in CS, you were trying to get all these jobs, but you didn't necessarily know all the right people because you're from the East Coast and a lot of tech jobs are on the West Coast. And so another thing that MBA I think is really helpful for is just unlocking a huge network of people.
Yes.
That can get you into places.
Absolutely. That's so true.
Okay, so you tried strategy consulting, you tried product management.
So, continuing on this life story, I tried both of them. I had internships at both, and I ultimately came away from both of them realizing that, okay, neither of these are a good fit for me either,
Yeah.
which was very disheartening. But also, after getting over the initial shock of, okay, now I went to business school and these things didn't work out. What am I doing? It gave me the clarity I needed to think, okay, I've eliminated, after trying various things, I've been able to eliminate these things from the possibility pool. And now I felt much more focused on, okay, I know I'm doing engineering the most, science and math, and I want to be more technical than these roles were allowing me to be.
Mm-hmm.
So, what if I did engineering in a different industry? Would that be better? And during my product management internship, I actually did get to work in Silicon Valley, but it was in a product management role. And so I interfaced with a lot of the engineers and I saw that, hey, they're having a lot of fun and I what they're doing. I'm very interested in what they're doing. And I found myself drawn to the technical discussions in the product management role. So that's what triggered in my mind, okay, it wasn't that engineering was not the right place for me. It was that the defense industry wasn't the right place for me. Mm-hmm. And I was much more of a Silicon Valley type engineer.
Right. And so much of what you enjoy in a role is also one, the role, and also two, the environment. I never liked history as a student, but having the right history teacher can make the subject seem fascinating, right? So, and you could be working an engineer role at an absolute terrible company and you're like, I hate my job, but then you switch and all of a sudden it's better.
It is so true. The environment makes such a difference. And it was very eye-opening for me to see how engineering is done differently in different industries. And the environment, as well as the role, need to be taken into account when you're trying to decide on a career path, what's a right fit for me.
And I feel something that we commonly joke with you is, oh, you did engineering and then did an MBA only to go back to what you were doing before. And for the longest time, I didn't even know that you had an MBA. Would you do an MBA again?
Okay, so I wish I could have figured out what I did through the program without having to do an MBA. But given the fact that I needed that clarity of trying these things, otherwise, like, I would have always thought in the back of my head, any job I was in, if there was any bump in the road and I was suddenly unhappy in it, because it's not always perfect, right?
Right.
I would have thought, oh, maybe this isn't the right path for me. Maybe I should try product management. Maybe I should try consulting or strategy consulting. It gave me the clarity to feel, no, I've already tried those things and I know what it was in them. I'd pick this over that.
Because I think sometimes people think that, oh, I took the long way around to get to where I'm at now. And so in hindsight, I would have just done it directly.
Right.
But also, if you hadn't taken the long way around, you wouldn't have discovered those things about yourself or had the information to make the right decision for yourself.
That's exactly true. And I think looking back on it now, I think I'm very happy I went through that experience because there are people that I know that are in roles or in jobs where they just kept trudging forward and they went through it and they're successful, but are they fulfilled? And it's not necessarily the case. Spent my 20s going through a lot of challenges of trying to find fulfillment, but it ultimately led me to finding that fulfillment. And so sometimes you do have to take that long path and you shouldn't beat yourself up over it.
Right.
Easy to feel you have this progressive linear path as you're going through school and you're always doing well and next big thing. Sometimes the path isn't linear. It can be circuitous. It can be back and forth, up and down.
Right.
As long as you're narrowing the field of potential where you want to do what you want to do next, that's the important part. Learning more about yourself and figuring out where you want to fit in within the opportunities that the world has at the moment.
Right. And because I feel like it maybe took you a little longer to find what you wanted to do, did you ever feel behind in life compared to other people, or did you think about that at all?
I did. I thought about it a lot. I always felt, oh, I'm always 2 steps behind. Everyone's already moved on. They've already finished their MBAs and started their next second job out of their MBAs. And I'm still trying to figure out my career. And people have already moved to 3 promotions, 4 promotions, or their 4th job and things like that. And it's easy to compare. I think something that I eventually came to that's worked really well for me is you should really only compare to yourself. Am I moving forward on my path? And am I better than I was yesterday or anything, something like that?
Mhm.
Because everyone's on a different path. Everyone has their own ups and downs. And it's a shock to the system when you first come out of school. You're all moving together along the same path. Now it's time for you to split and do your own thing. And so everyone's timelines are different.
Mhm.
And so I will say, like, even now, do I feel I'm a bit behind others at my age and how successful they've become in Silicon Valley and whatnot? Absolutely, I do notice that. But at the same time, I feel so fulfilled in what I do right now
Yeah.
that it's a footnote on it. At least I found what I really like to do and I'm very happy with it.
Mhm.
So what if I'm a few years behind, in some sense, behind, right?
Right.
Whatever, I'll just live longer and then it won't matter, right? So in that regard, I think it's natural for you to feel that way and think that way.
Mm.
I think it's important to remind yourself it's your life path, it's your timeline. You're not comparing it to someone else's timeline.
And then in those times when maybe you were rethinking your career and what you wanted to do, and maybe you were feeling bad about yourself, how did you recover from that?
I will say, I think my friends were super supportive. Having someone to talk about these feelings and getting good support of, hey, it's okay, don't worry about it. What are you going to do next? I think that's the other thing. I spent a period of time where I would focus on how things weren't working out the way I wanted them to. And I wasn't putting enough energy into what actions am I going to take to keep moving forward. And I had a really good friend that always reminded me of, hey, I empathize with you. It sucks that it didn't work out how you really wanted it to. But okay, what are we going to do next? What action are you going to take?
Right. You can't
Yeah.
keep feeling sorry for yourself forever.
Exactly. And looking back on it now, I wish I could tell myself, hey, it's going to be okay. We all make mistakes, quote unquote mistakes, learning opportunities. I hate to call them mistakes, but we all take different learning opportunities, take different paths. We learn things from them and it guides us. Because the world is such a big open place, it's only by going down certain paths that you find the path that you actually really want to go.
Right. Totally. And then, so after your MBA, you worked at Ford for a
Mm-hmm.
bit, and then obviously very large company.
Yeah.
And did you get enough that you're okay, engineering is right for me?
So I think that was the first transition point that really gave me a big boost in confidence that, hey, um, all my MBA friends, my family might think I'm crazy that I did an MBA and now I'm not taking any of these MBA offers and saying, hey, no, I'm going to go back into being fully technical as an engineer. And when I got to Ford, I was nervous. Okay, did I make another misstep or something like that? But it turned out I had amazing coworkers there. We were in the same age bracket and I felt I fit in. The culture of engineering was better. We were using the tools that I wanted to use. There was excitement around the latest and greatest cutting edge technology and how do we incorporate it into the products we're building. And it had that technical excitement that I was looking for. And so that gave me some reassurance. Hey, okay, this actually feels right. And a lot of those things that did feel wrong, I was right. They were wrong. And this one actually feels right.
Right.
There were still some parts of it that weren't the best or perfect, but it felt like I had taken a step in the right direction. So that was very reassuring.
And was that maybe one of the first jobs you had that felt
Yeah.
affirming?
And it's so crazy to me because I took that job when I was 30, 31. And so it took me all of my 20s before I actually found a job that I actually felt, wow, I'm actually here.
Yeah. Was there ever a point between 20s to 30s that you felt, I've tried so many things, I don't know if this is going to work out?
I grew up feeling like maybe other people felt this way too. So you're successful, you feel you have it all figured out. I'm smart, I know what I'm doing, I figured this out. And after enough missteps and admitting to yourself,
Right.
right, that, oh no, this isn't the right thing, and oh no, this isn't the right thing, and you keep bouncing between things,
Yeah.
you definitely build some self-doubt. It
You
wears you
try
down.
so hard and then, wow, it's just nothing's working out for me.
And so that self doubt can creep in, but you got to reassure yourself that, hey, you are a smart person and you are noticing and observing things that things aren't right for you. And you're not, it's not just in your head. These are actually real things. And it may be the case that all of these well paved paths that others have taken, that maybe your friends are taking or your family's recommending, they may not be the right path for you. And that's okay.
Mhm.
It's scary because you're going to take a path that's less walked, but you're a smart, capable person.
Right.
You can navigate it. So build a bit more self confidence. And I've actually had some of my former MBA classmates tell me, we are so impressed with the conviction you had, because if I were in your shoes coming out of an MBA program, I don't know if I would have been able to buck the trend and not follow people into these paths that everyone else seemed really happy about going into.
Mhm.
And I had done enough of those missteps before the MBA program to realize, no, I'm not going to do this again. I've tried it, so I'm going to go this way.
Mhm. So then after Ford, you went on to work at Argo, which was a huge billion-dollar unicorn startup,
Yeah.
which ultimately did not make it,
Yeah.
but I think still probably a great experience. And now you're at Nvidia.
Yes.
So between working at a startup and working at a large established public company, what do you think are the differences and which one do you enjoy more?
There are definitely big differences. A startup is absolutely more nimble, more agile, more fast paced, very much open to using absolutely the latest and greatest cutting edge technology, the newest releases of all the different products, all of that. They are trying to outdo the big tech companies by using every advantage, using the latest tools. So that part of it is super exciting. You also work with people who are very passionate about what the startup is doing.
Mhm.
They're into it. They wouldn't have taken that risk of joining the startup if they weren't. And so you'll meet some of the most passionate, most hardworking people at a startup. And that's very, very exciting too, because then you get to build relationships with them in the industry that you're in. And then they go on to do amazing things, and you keep in touch and you might work with them again in the future. So that's the really exciting aspect of it. There are cons to it too, compared to a big tech company. I'd say the hours are longer. The amount of responsibility that you have is much larger. That can be challenging. It can be a great point of growth as well, but it can also be too much too soon. And I think
What about the pay?
pay is also going to be, compensation will be lower. You'll have a lot of equity that may or may not pan out. So that's also a factor to consider as well. All of that. So those are the trade-offs. And now working in big tech, I can really see the differences. The amount of responsibility that I get is more limited. The projects I work on are smaller in scope because we have so many employees. Everything is divvied up amongst everyone. It's easier to just feel a cog in a machine because there's just so many people. Whereas as a startup, you build very close relationships with the people you're working with. It's much more tight knit. And in terms of great things about working at a big tech company, though, I think the benefits are amazing. There's much more flexibility in your working hours. There's many more projects that you could potentially work on. The support that you get in terms of continuing education and things like that can be better. And of course, the compensation is much more tangible as
Right.
opposed to potentially being something big in the
Right.
future.
Especially when Nvidia stock is going up so well.
Yes. It's a very good time to be here.
Given all your career changes and now you're well established as an engineer,
Mhm.
how do you think about maybe the rest of your life?
That's a really good question. I think having gone through this long, circuitous path and ending up where I am now and feeling fulfilled, it's helped me develop that skill of going into something ambiguous or uncertain and being able to find my way through. So that gives me a lot more self confidence that, hey, in other aspects of my life outside of career, if something's very uncertain, I have the ability to navigate this
Mhm.
and I won't back down or get scared away. I think it's a very useful growing process. I look back on it now, and it's a lot of sadness, a lot of challenging, hurtful times, times when you're really upset. It's not all happiness, right? And having gone through that, though, I now feel much more stable in terms of I know what I don't, and I feel confident in making those decisions as opposed to, oh, maybe I'll this or maybe I'll that. I think it's part of the growing process of going through your 20s.
Right. Okay, so switching gears a little bit, something I
Yeah.
wanted to talk about is I think it's so fun and cool that your dad bought you a Rolex and bought your sister Birkins and
Yeah.
all these things. So, because he was a mechanic,
Yes.
right? So, where did he decide to have that tradition?
Yeah. In my dad's back of his mind, I think he always thought I need to save my money because my kids will need it in the future. And I'll
In
need
case
to,
they don't find
yeah,
the careers they want?
exactly. In case something happens or whatnot. And I think to his pleasant surprise, all of us ended up doing pretty well and being well taken care of. We're doing well in our careers or have good families and all of that. And suddenly he had all this money he'd saved up, and he was, well, what do I do with it? And I think he was very excited to give us the things that he never had a chance to have. And so he's a big watch person. He was so excited to give me a Rolex. And we went Rolex shopping together and looked at the different models. And then with my sisters, they're very into the Hermes and various other different high-end luxury products. And so he didn't really connect with those as much, but it probably gave them the same feeling as he did with. So it was a very exciting period for him to be able to do all these things for us when he couldn't do them before.
Right. And now, even with you, your income has probably changed drastically from being a government worker in a lab to now being a senior, very senior level software engineer. Have your spending habits changed? Are there things that you spend money on now that you didn't before?
There are. I think lifestyle creep is real. I think though it is good to reward yourself. If you've worked hard, you've gone through, and there are things that you enjoy. So I've started buying newer clothes. I've started buying nicer designer shoes. I started dabbling into more jewelry, things like that. So it's been a fun exploration. I recently bought a new guitar, one of my favorite Ibanez models. So can't wait for that to arrive. So it's nice to enjoy the fruits of your labor too after going through a long path to get there.
And have you thought of what you'll do after Nvidia? I think you'll stay there for a while.
So I actually don't know, and that's okay. I think I'll stay there for at least the next 3 years, maybe longer. I'll feel it out. But now I think I feel much more comfortable with the uncertainty. Who knows what opportunities will come in a few years? Who knows what my life will look in a few years? But in this moment, I'm fulfilled where I am, and I'll reassess when the time comes. So it's okay to not have a full plan laid out. It's perfectly good to know, hey, this is right for me right now. And then when the time comes to make a shift, you'll make it.
Right. I hate the question of when people ask, oh, what are your 5-year plan? Or where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? I think I can plan my life maybe a few months in advance. And that's pretty much it. Because like you said, so many opportunities come up that you would never have been able to predict.
Right.
Right. And it's if you didn't have any friends in consulting, if you didn't have any friends doing MBA, or if you hadn't gotten acquainted to physics through your engineering classes, maybe your life would have ended up very differently.
Right.
And so I think trying to plan too far in advance is actually not helpful because you're going to have a lot more information in the future than you do now.
Exactly. That's exactly it. You may not be exposed to the things that you'll eventually find your interest in or calling for. And that just takes time and exposure. You expand your perspective, and that helps you, said, make better decisions or get drawn to things that you didn't even know existed.
Right. And for those who are still trying to figure out their career, what actionable advice would you give them to help them find something as quickly as possible?
So I think definitely do a lot of self-reflection. Be true to yourself. Get away from the noise of what your friends are doing or what your family's suggesting, and really sit down, understand your personality, understand what you and what you don't. And it's going to be a big pool of things that have potential. And my view is the best thing you can do is try to dip your toes into each one of them, get some exposure to see what it really is, because there's only so much you can extrapolate from other people's experiences. And it's important to talk to people. I'd recommend one, talk to people who have done the path or done the role that you think you might want to do. Learn as much about it as you can. And then if at that point it still sounds interesting to you, then try to find a way to dip your toes in, whether that's taking a class in the subject or shadowing a doctor that's in the specialty that you're interested in. Things like that. Try to get as much information you can without making a very heavy commitment. And then if you're, again, still interested, then at some point you should try to go for it. And I did with my MBA, right? I was, okay, I think I've done enough research. I've talked to enough people. I've narrowed down what I want to do within the MBA program. I'm going to go for it now.
Right.
And did it work out exactly as I had thought I had predicted? No, but I got a lot from it, and I figured out my next steps after that. And so it's this continuous process of trying things and refining based on the new experiences that you have. And so it can be scary because you never really have complete 100% clarity. And you'll learn to be okay with that because over time, what ends up happening is you might be taking this meandering path, trying different things, but you get closer and closer to what you actually want to be doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I guess with the whole meandering path thing, right?
Hmm.
Where sometimes you're going to feel you're progressing, where maybe you found your fourth job, right? And then you
Yeah.
very clearly feel, okay, I found the right fit. And
Yeah.
then other times you feel you're taking a few steps forward and 10 steps back. And so progress, you don't actually feel you're making any progress with your life. And how did you combat that feeling? Because I think it can be very discouraging to feel everything you're trying and working so hard at is not getting you anywhere.
It definitely is discouraging. I think what helped me is for sure have friends that you can talk to about it and coworkers that you can talk to about it as well. Hearing other stories, and I'm hoping that by sharing my story, this might help people out as well. Hearing other stories about, hey, okay, I had this great job here, and then I had this amazing opportunity, and I jumped to it. And it turns out it wasn't as amazing as I thought. And now I feel, oh no, I made this huge mistake. But then also, hey, I went from there and I jumped over here and turned out, oh, this is amazing now and way better than where I was when I started. And so hearing enough of these stories and seeing it happen enough, you realize that very, very, very few people actually have this perfectly linear path. And in fact, most people will bounce around and learn and gain skills in these other areas that they then bring back to what they actually want to do. And suddenly they're even more of a better employee or a better professional at that thing because they have this well-rounded skill set from areas that people typically wouldn't have skills from. So it can seem meandering, but you're actually gaining little badges along the way of different skill sets and things like that. So your unique journey actually makes you a unique candidate in different roles. And you can use that as an asset. It's not always or even ever a detriment.
I totally agree. Well, thank you so much, Kunal, for coming on the pod. And if his story resonated with you, I'll link all of his socials below. And thank you for tuning in.
Thank you for having me.